Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And here's a surprise for you. Today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Juice WRLD, A Death Race for Love. So some of you might be a little bit confused why I'm reviewing this. If you've been following my series Billboard Breakdown, you might remember Juice WRLD as a perennial frustration for me, and that the reviews of his solo sophomore project haven't even been good to start with, even from the critics inclined to give him a pass. And I'm not one of those people. So why would I do this to myself? Why listen to a project that is comfortably over an hour long in a blatant attempt at stream trolling by Interscope, who is well aware that Juice WRLD might not last too long? Well, part of this is a matter of a deeper investigation, because in the wake of the deaths of XXXTentacion and Lil Peep, two of the biggest personalities within the new breed of emo rap, they left considerable voids, and Juice WRLD could well fill both of them. He's certainly more accessible than both acts thanks to his ability to construct a hook, and there's absolutely a market for the sound that he delivers. So yeah, part of this comes from me keeping my ear to the ground, especially if this kid might stick around, and while thanks to his terrible singles choices, he does seem committed to burning out pretty fast, on a technical level, I do think he's got some talent. Yeah, his auto-tune caterwauling is annoying, but he can mostly structure bars and construct a hook. If I'm gonna be humiliatingly honest, I do get Juice WRLD's appeal to a specific demographic, mostly because about 15 years or so ago, I was in that demo, and there's a way to make music that appeals to that group and not, suck. I didn't expect it would happen with Juice WRLD, but I figured I would give him a chance. So what did we find on Death Race for Love? Well, I'll be very honest. My original plan with this review was just to make fun of this album for a while. It's not hard. I could just quote the majority of lyrics here and just call it a day. I mean, the jokes, they write themselves. And make no mistake, we'll be doing a fair amount of that anyway, because there is a goldmine of atrocious bars on this 22-song project, and I'm sure as hell not going to be taking this that seriously, along with everyone else who treats this as a meme that's starting to go stale. But keep in mind that there is a whole audience of kids who do take this seriously, just like you might have taken certain acts seriously when you were young, and now look back and kind of wince a little bit. So while I'll come here and say that this album is goddamn terrible, and it is, as the shield of irony starts to run thin about 12 songs in, let's dig into the base appeal of something like this, which to me runs somewhere between Lil Yachty's uncanny penchant for melody, the insufferable whinging of Simple Plan, and the rampant aggro nihilism of Limp Bizkit, and then the atrocious writing of all three to put together. But before we get into the heavy stuff, let's get through the obvious points of criticism, and let's start with the production. Now, given my suspicion that Interscope is trying to milk Juice WRLD's popularity for as short-lived as it'll probably be, you can absolutely tell there are moments that are rushed as all hell in terms of the mixing and mastering of this thing. The bass beats are way too clunky and heavy. When the melodies aren't drowned out, they're often on a much cleaner pickup on pianos or guitar line that shows his producers are looking to grab as much of the Lil Peep market as possible. But then when you choose to drown out said guitars and a lot of reverb, or utterly kill any real sizzle or edge behind them, and then you tack on Juice WRLD's voice, which is nearly always too loud or peaking in the mix, especially on Syphilis and Ring Ring, because this album's got precisely no sense of balance and even less atmosphere, well, nothing feels all that well blended or cohesive. This is especially apparent on the songs where after maybe 2 verses, the production will just run for a few extra bars in order to pad out the song. Or in some places, out of nowhere beat switches or samples that don't match the overall mood of the track at all. I mean, Big probably has the most obvious example of this, but then we also get on the Bee's Knees, courtesy of No ID of all people. And then we got on 10 Feet, we get a very liberal Daniel Caesar sample that I'm frankly really disappointed he cleared. Then we got Juice WRLD himself, and he's probably a better rapper than he is a singer, mostly because the auto-tune wails he attempts are hysterical even before the bad ad-libs. But on the flip side, as an MC, he doesn't really have a lot of personality beyond repeating words to fill up space, with some songs clearly trying for a future imitation like Big, and on God with Young Thug, he's mostly a lesser version of Thugger. We already have Gunna for that, we don't need Juice WRLD to do it too. But those are the component parts of the album. What's all the more alarming is how rushed and and unpolished it feels. Not like the pretensions towards lo-fi and punk that XXXTentacion was working, but rather because the major label knows that most of the audience won't care about good mixing or mastering so long as some sort of hook is there. And while you can maybe excuse that on a short, tossed-off EP, it's a little bit less excusable on a project that is this long and sloppily sequenced. Why they felt the need to tack on an interlude that's just Brent Faiyaz is utterly beyond me, but if only to break up the Juice WRLD, it probably should have been deeper in the track list, as it's probably the part of this album I find the most tolerable. Now, on the production angle, are there at least a couple songs that kinda work? Well, certainly nothing that conveys any sense of menace or darkness or grit or even serious melancholy, but if I want to praise anything or find something that worked, the spare atmospherics and the snap around Brent Faiyaz's interlude Demonz, it's decently mellow, and I did like the way they flipped the Daniel Caesar sample, and both Won't Let Go and Make Believe, they've got some momentum behind them. But on the flip side, who thought that tropical bounce was a good idea on Hear Me Callin', especially with Juice WRLD's attempt at a Jamaican accent, or the rinky-dink keys on Feeling and She's the One, or the terrible guitar mixing on Who Shot Cupid, or that gross chipmunk effect drizzled all through Desire, or the oily mess that becomes the Bee's Knees, or even the honking elements that come through on Maze. But now onto the fun stuff. Because while Juice WRLD might be a marginally better rapper than a singer, it also doesn't mean he's not gonna flub entirely too many rhymes, and we've got a wealth of terrible lines on this project. And I'm only gonna highlight this because not only is he not trying to be funny or self-aware, these are moments that utterly take you out of the song and shatter any mood that he's trying to create. Lines that are easily as bad as you would hear on Lil Yachty's Teenage Emotions, but delivered with the melodramatic sincerity of Simple Plan. He's believing what he's selling. And while I could focus on his weird tendency of trying to over-explain some of his references in order to force rhymes, Big is full of this, or I could highlight the weirdly clingy and kind of pathetic way he approaches all the relationships, but I'm gonna split the bad lyrics into 3 categories. And let's start off with the ones that are just so goddamn stupid, such as on Hear Me Calling, where he says he's going to hit the beach in LA like you a beach ball. Or on Out My Way, he says, I don't give a shit and I don't give a Hoover damn. Or on the Bee's Knees, we get the classic dicked up in her brain concussion. And while we're on the topic of sex references, we also got She's the One, with a line about her getting so fucking wet he had to build a dam, and how he's going to eat her like studio cookies. And that's not even getting to the entire second verse of Feeling. I mean, check it out for yourself. It's a riot. And then we get the emo lyrics that are just trying way too hard, just come across as kind of laughable. Starting on Empty with how much of the black hole is in the place of his soul, and the only thing suicide is the suicide does, followed by Emotions, where he's going through a lot of muddy emotions and then says, back on my bullshit. Devil emoji. Gravitas. Then deeper on, we have Won't Let Go, where if she dies, you should bury him with her, which is also in a song where he calls her a hoe who buys her soul. But let's also not forget Rider, where he says, she gets me high as supplier and I'm on fire. Will she be my firefighter? And while I can make fun of Robbery again for its hysterical conceit and the awful delivery, but finally we've got the lines that are way more revealing of Juice WRLD's psyche than they should be. Especially around women. Bars like on Robbery, like how he should flex on a hoe every time that she's insecure. Or how on Syphilis there's a dick on his gun that he's going to fuck your face with. Or how on Big he pisses on your dead homie's grave. And let's not forget On God with Young Thug, where all Thugger's first verse is about making her into a trophy, and Juice WRLD's verse has the line, I'm Paul Walker when I'm taking off. He's going fast and furious on the hose. And since I've already pissed off everybody, let's pile on and bring up toxic masculinity, specifically in the realm of its appeal. Because while there are so many terrible lines on this project that I don't see how anyone can empathize with, on some level I get the appeal. On some level, to exercise and live out our darker impulses and vices as guys, a lot of us want to be the swaggering macho chads who start fights, get bitches, fires off guns, and smacks the posers in line to earn our place at the top of the pyramid, brah. Look, all of this is not how the whole picture of how to be a man, guys. Just the worst possible projection of it that hurts us more in the long run. I mean, think about this rationally. But you know what? There is a baseline animalistic appeal to it, and one that Juice WRLD isn't afraid to acknowledge. Often in the same song where he's gonna whinge about how much he hates himself and tries to numb the pain through meaningless sex, drugs, and piles of money. And you know what? I'm not excusing the emo sad boys here either, who might not project strength, but absolutely carry some of the same sort of projections towards themselves and women to often even more worse and insidious results. I mean, this has been rampant in the scene since at least the 80s in terms of emo. Juice WRLD is just another figure in the pantheon. This is nothing new. And hell, when you match that up to a bunch of insidiously catchy hooks and you don't stop to think about most of the contradictions, as most of the audience won't, you've got a recipe for success and young fans of both genders, because we're drawn to what is told as toxic by authority figures and society, especially at that age. And when you pair it with adolescent disillusionment and a relatively unpolished figure who represents all the contradictions to which you think you can relate, I totally get why this guy's got an audience. In the exact same way nu metal had an audience in the late 90s and early 2000s. Now, I'll question anybody who spends their money to hear this. I mean, that's an endorsement ledge I'm avoiding in a much larger capitalism conversation that's bigger than Juice WRLD will ever be. But I'll say it, there is a space in art for negative or even toxic emotions and content. Provided, of course, there is context. And here's where the toxic masculinity and the quasi-nihilism becomes a problem. Because not only is this material primarily marketed at teens and preteens and kids who aren't even trying to see the deeper context, especially when there isn't any, but the framing is goddamn terrible, especially when he has songs like Out My Way, where he outright says all the emo stuff is a facade. The most I can give this project is that the hooks can sometimes materialize, but drill even a little bit deeper, and this project fails on principle, because the flexing isn't appealing or convincing, and the sad boy depression prompts a lot of hysterical laughter, and that's not even getting into the wishy-washy but highly questionable approach he takes to drug abuse, and the problem is, they're all on the same song. There's no tonal consistency. I mean, the best material in this emotional territory can balance out the huge hooks with the angst and the anger and the vices, provide a real emotional root to all of this. It's why Linkin Park's early albums have had so much staying power to their audiences even to this day. But Juice WRLD doesn't even seem to care about tonal balance, and it leads to a lot of songs that feel unfocused, really cringy, and by the time you're running up on an hour of it, really repetitive and boring. I mean, if you're gonna be toxic, say something about it, have something to say, make it interesting. But Juice WRLD's not really providing us much insight or storytelling or even much complexity at all, presumably because he probably feels he doesn't have to, because his audience isn't asking for it. I mean, the final song does a Stan riff, but even then it doesn't have the complexity Stan did. And this is where I can't avoid how sterile, corporate, and lazy it all feels. Because even if Juice WRLD believes all of what he's selling, which I will question, all I can see here is an Interscope executive behind him who knows that he can't drown out the snickering from me forever and is gonna wring out as much money out of this kid as possible, especially after Sting took so much on the splits of Lucid Dreams. Hell, that's why Juice WRLD's put out 3 projects in less than a year, and they're mining old recording sessions to stream troll an album that probably should have been cut in half. Twice! But at the end of the day, you know what? I've always been told you should know what your name says about you. And the fact that this kid is named Juice WRLD, it's very telling to me. Beyond juice being the obvious drug reference, you know what? Juice is just empty, sugary calories, primarily consumed by kids. And WRLD shows that most people are gonna get on board regardless. He's got widespread appeal, even if it's a sugar rush that'll lead to a migraine afterwards. Also, WRLD is spelt wrong because it's America, and of course it is. And this is crap. It's rushed, it's unbearably long, it's tonally incoherent, that thanks to streaming stripping away any vague sense of consumer accountability, and a whole bunch of playlist payola from Interscope, because the only way this is going to move units is streaming, it's going to be consumed en masse by a lot of kids who will take all this at face value, which is what is really toxic, especially when you see the label behind it pushing that. And you know what, I'll say it, this is worse than XXXTentacion, because whatever you could say about him, rest in peace, his music came from a real place. Whereas this is slapdash and astonishingly low quality. Junk music perfect for a junk food nation. In other words, like 2 out of 10, and while I would not claim to be an expert in all things trap by any means, I know when I'm getting sold garbage. Frankly, folks, take your money elsewhere. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine some of you are really angry, I can also imagine some of you are expecting that I'm not angrier, but the truth is, outside of the fact that there's so much better stuff in emo rap going past the past couple of decades, really coming up on 2 decades at this point, I kind of feel bad for Juice WRLD, if I'm being honest, because he seems like he's getting milked for all it's worth by the label. I'm honestly kind of worried. This stuff is disposable. It's going to be forgotten as quickly as anything else. I remember what happened to Simple Plan in the mid-2000s, and look upon them now, they're a joke. I see that happening to Juice WRLD, and that to me kind of makes me feel bad because the label in terms of artistic development should be stopping that. That's kind of sad on that whole front, and otherwise it's garbage. Like, I'm not going to endorse this or support it, but hey, if you want to buy or stream it, links down there below, and I got the poll up there for y'all to tell me how wrong I am, but in this case, I've been down this rabbit hole a number of times before. I don't think I'm wrong. But hey, anything else I might be able to do to still improve my presentation, I'm all ears. I'm still kind of fiddling with my light setup, so leave some comments on how you think that's turning out. Last time it was a little bit overexposed. I tried to ease things back a little bit here. But hey, till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.